Club's Forum Committee. For more than a century, City Club of Portland, civic-minded people work together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live and explore. We're gathered today at the Sentinel Hotel and are joined by thousands of Oregonians via X-Ray FM radio stations, KGW's website, Facebook feed and news app, and Open Signal's community media television stations. In addition to City Club's valued media partners, our sponsors enable us to put on the state's best civic programs week after week. I'd like to recognize the Oregon Historical Society for supporting today's event and to thank them for their generous support. Please join me in showing our appreciation to the sponsors, staff, and volunteers who have made this event possible. Today, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Danielle Outlaw, Portland's new police chief. Raised in Oakland, California, and a veteran to the Oakland Police Department, Chief Outlaw comes to Portland to bring her vision, her commitment, and community engagement to the Bureau's top position. I'm eager to hear the chief today and their vision for Portland. Joining Chief Outlaw is Joe Wall, the founder of Wall and Associates, and one of the people who help the city find and hire Chief Outlaw. He previously was the assistant director for Portland's Office of Equity and Human Rights and was one of the founders of Partners in Diversity, was the president of the Portland Japanese American Citizens League, and president of the Oregon Buddhist Temple, I'm not done yet, and is a founder of the board member of the Oregon Nikki Endowment. In a moment, Mr. Wall will help us learn more about Chief Outlaw's background and also talk about some of the challenges she may face as she's joined Portland. But first, join me in welcoming Danielle Outlaw.
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Wow. Thank you so much for an amazingly warm welcome. That was actually pretty overwhelming. But if that were to happen again, the last time I stood up on stage, I said I would get a picture, and I got it. Thank you. You know, there was recognition given to our young people in the room a few minutes ago, but I would like them to stand up. How about the civic scholars and the students from North Clackamas High School? Stand up, please. Ladies and gentlemen, these are our future. They are here and are constantly shaping the future of our city and our world. Thank you. To the civic scholars, we actually had the opportunity to meet before I came in the room, and they had some tough questions, really tough. And I am so encouraged, not just by their mindset, but the fact that they have the forethought to ask the questions that they did. And I am deeply encouraged by your engagement and your participation and the fact that you're even here today. And then I was told, okay, there's a young man in here that's in the 8th grade. I forgot his name. Where are you? Please stand up. Yes. This young man did not go to school today to come hear me because he wants a future in law enforcement, correct? I appreciate you. Thank you. And thank you to his mom for letting him be here. All right, City Club. They only gave me a few minutes just to say a couple of things. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone in the room and I am strongly humbled by the invite to even have the opportunity to be heard. I've been here for the last 7 months. I'm not counting, but I've been here for the last 7 months. And it's been a whirlwind. It's been nonstop, but it's been extremely satisfying and rewarding. And I will say the encouragement and the support that I have received thus far has been remarkable, absolutely remarkable. I have put forth 3 goals for the Portland Police Bureau. The first of which is organizational excellence, and that's an inward look. It's at everything that we do to make sure that we are performing at our peak optimally. What does that involve? That means we're looking at how we train, who we train, what we train. Are we having the proper policies in place that are in alignment with the mission, vision, and values of our Bureau? Do we have the proper resources that we need to get this done? Are we listening to the community? What mechanisms do we have in place to make sure that we hear you and that we're responsive to what you're asking us for and what your needs are? Then there's also crime engagement, actually community engagement and inclusion. And it's important to say "and inclusion" because it's not just how we engage the community, but how are we including you in what we do, in how we recruit, how we hire, who we promote, what our policies say, and how we implement. Are we involving you? And are we getting out and making sure that we're interacting with you so you see us in opportunities of more than just times of enforcement? And then lastly, I think any chief will tell you that their bread and butter would fall under crime prevention and crime reduction. One of the first things that I did when I got here, I said, show me the stats. What do you mean, Chief? Which stats? Show me our crime stats. How are we faring in violent crime? How are we faring in property crimes? And what are we doing about it? How are we being strategic in how we deploy our resources to make sure that we're not only smart, but we're focused and we're precise in how we deploy? Are we making sure that we are utilizing every strategy that we have available to us through an equity lens? Are we mindful of the fact that those who are the most vulnerable are victims of crime, but at the same time are on the disparate end of how they get treated when we are enforcing, when we are implementing our strategies? All of these things come together and are interconnected. And just really briefly, I want to tell you, you might have been hearing about some things that have been on the horizon or some things that we've been doing. Training has been key. You might have heard about the de-escalation training that we've rolled out recently. We're also rolling out implicit bias training in the coming weeks. I'm really excited to talk about the fact that we are putting together our strategic plan. For those of you in the room, I see some nods, thank you. That's our blueprint for the next 5 years, our roadmap. Where do we plan to be? How are we going to get there? And I am putting this plug out there right now because we are going to be asking for community support. There will be many invitations for focus groups, community forums, because we want to hear from you to help us shape the vision where we're going in the next 5 years. And then lastly, I would like to tout the fact that we were pretty successful. I think the budget just passed. Is that right, boss? Mouthful of food? We're close? And I will say that because, you know, obviously we still have some time, but it's been an uphill battle. There have been a lot of high-profile incidents here we've been involved in, and community trust is extremely important. And one of the first things people ask was, well, why do you need more cops when we don't trust the ones that we have? And that's really important. It's a very valid question. Everyone doesn't share that thought. But my role as the chief is to make sure that I engaged in dialogue with those who feel that way and do everything that I can to shape their perspective so we're all on the same page. So with that, I look forward to our discussion here. And again, thank you so much for the warm welcome, and I look forward to working with everyone in the room in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. For our radio audience, this is City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Joe Wall, the founder of Wall & Associates, and I'm here today with Danielle Outlaw, the now not-so-new Chief of the Portland Police Bureau.
I'm still new.
Chief, you came from Oakland, California, which, as most of us know, is considerably more diverse as a community. So how has it been coming to what has been characterized as the whitest big city in America?
White. Next question. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So with that, what have been the biggest challenges?
I was kidding. I won't even say, I mean, I was asked that question when I got here. You know, how do you anticipate faring in a not so diverse city? I knew what I was getting into. And one of the responses that I'd given was, I want to make sure that we focus on what we have in common versus than that which separates us. And I say that because we all share the basic needs of safety. We all want to be safe in our homes, in our neighborhoods, our parks, our environments. We all need shelter, we all need food. So why not focus on what we all need and want and come together at the table and work towards goals in that arena, as opposed to focusing on what divides us. Now, with that said, you know, it sounds real pie in the sky, but it's still easier said than done, because the reality is that even though it's less than 6%, our communities of color, myself included, we still have a different set of needs when it comes to feeling safe in our communities, in our environments. And that doesn't make us divisive. It just means that I, as a police chief, have to make sure that attention is paid to those needs as well. So it's being very insightful, not only when I'm addressing specific needs of certain communities, but I have to make sure that we message that just because we have a strategy for one neighborhood, that doesn't mean that it works in another neighborhood. And I have to be flexible and willing to listen, because everybody doesn't want the same thing. So I'll just say that I won't call it a challenge, but it's a lot to keep up with, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you. I know that in our discussion with the students earlier, you were asked about the budget. In your requested budget, you requested 93 new officers, and what ended up going forward was 52 officers or thereabouts. So many in the community expressed concern in regard to if that went through, what you weren't going to be able to do. So can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Sure. So when I got here, I did a pretty thorough assessment of what our needs were. And it had become very clear right off the bat that we were being asked a lot of things. And rightfully so. If I were to dial 911, I would want the police to call, or police to come right away. And what we found was that our response times for a lot of high priority calls were ridiculous. Some calls taking over an hour. And so we made the request for additional bodies so not only we could address demand, meaning that we can get to calls for service in a reasonable amount of time according to the standard, the national standard, but also to allow our officers to have more discretionary time to get out of their cars, be visible, get out and walk their neighborhoods, all the things that we want them to do. I'm asked about community policing all the time. What's your program? And I push back and say, we value community policing, but it's not a program, it's a philosophy. It's not a checkbox. It's how we, again, how we recruit, who we hire, the types of questions that we ask them, you know, who's on our oral boards? Are we including the community in our oral boards? Are we including them in promotion decisions? All of these things. So it's a lot bigger than just the officer on the street getting out and smiling or engaging in a basketball camp. A lot bigger than that. But in order to be able to do all of these things, you got to have the bodies to do it. But it starts with just the basic calls for service, because that's who we are, right? We're the police bureau. So that's where we started. We asked for 93 bodies over 5 years to address that, just demand. But then a couple things happened. There was a gang enforcement team audit done by IPR, and what that audit revealed was that we needed to do a better job of how we track the data of who we stop and why, to allow us to measure the outcomes. So if we're saying we're stopping someone because we believe they were involved in a gang, as a result of that stop, were they in a gang or not, or whatever it is, right? So they said we need to do a better job with measuring our information. It also revealed that we needed to do a better job of communicating how we do business. Before I got here, there was something that the Portland Police Bureau utilized called at-risk list. And it would put individuals on this list that were believed to have some nexus to gang activity. But they weren't at that time necessarily connected to a crime of any kind. They would have been affiliated with a gang or, you know, again, not necessarily in having a nexus to crime. Wasn't a good thing. We got rid of that list. But what we didn't communicate was that at the same time, there was also a tool being used to collect information to identify who's most at risk of being involved in a gang. And this information was gleaned from evidence. So if casing, for example, fingerprint brings back a name, evidence, investigative summaries, or police reports. So while in the police world, this is not an uncommon practice, what we were attempting to do was a little bit unbaked in the sense that we didn't have parameters around how that information was used, meaning there was no policy, no clear structure on how to use the information. The audit revealed this, and it appeared as though we got rid of one list and then secretly began to compile another. That wasn't in fact the case, but it was still undercooked, and we went forward with it without all the proper accountability mechanisms in place. So I find out about this, I immediately direct to cease the use of this information until we could sit down and rethink and have some strong policy around the matter. But what this did was take us back a bajillion steps, trust-wise, with the community, right? So you have the GET audit that came out, and then you fast forward to maybe a couple weeks after that, and we had a very unfortunate critical incident that involved an officer-involved shooting. So now we have these two incidents, and then you have our ask for 93 officers. And trust in the community was waning at a very rapid pace. I spent a lot of time meeting with community members and speaking with those specifically impacted by not only the results of the audit, but also of the critical incident that happened at the shelter. And what I took away from those meetings was, we need to rethink what we're asking for now that we have the opportunity to do this. So I sat down with my staff, we sat down with the mayor's office staff, and I said, look, I need to make sure that we get not only a little bit of what we need right now, but we need to incorporate in our budget ask what the community is wanting and demanding of us. And so the result of that was what the mayor proposed. and the number of officers went down from 93 to a little over 50, with a lot of other things. Now we're bolstering our behavioral health unit. We're bolstering our training unit. We're adding staff to our equity unit. We're creating a liaison for the houseless community, right? And at the same time, we're still adding officers to allow us to be more visible, to have faster response times, to be engaged, and to do all the things that we're being asked to do without putting it on the backs of officers and burning them out at the same time. So I'm saying all that to say, if anybody walks away with anything from this, is that, things change. And as leaders, we have to be adaptive, and it might have to be on the fly sometimes. But I want people to know that this is the will of the people within the Bureau.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to kind of piggyback on that a little bit in regard to the number of officers, because I know there's been a lot of debate in regard to perhaps what was needed was, instead of more officers, was more support and resources for mental health. How do you respond to that?
Well, a part of the asks, or what I mean by the expansion of our behavioral health unit, is the fact that we're adding more sworn, but we're also adding more clinicians to do the follow-up. But ideally for me, and I'm putting this out there to anyone in the room and those in Radio Land who would love to help and partner, my ideal vision, and I think we can get there because it's done in other places, is to have the clinicians respond to the calls with the officers as they occur. So what that does, ultimately, the police, we don't want to be the ultimate answer, for things that have nothing to do with us. But right now, today, when you call, we have to come. So in the short term, if there's a way where we can partner and respond at the time the crisis is occurring and have someone with us, maybe, a peer counselor with us, or even a clinician with us, I think that'll be a step in the right direction until we can ultimately address the larger issue of mental health in our city.
Great, thank you. It's one of the things, when you come to a city that's not very diverse, obviously, you're very visible out there. So as a female leader of color, what do you feel is the most important thing that you can do?
I lost all my color when I moved here. We need some sun in the city of Portland. That's what I mean by that. I need a tan. I kid, but I did, and I say that because I went to the food pods. It was over on MLK, and it was a really nice gentleman that had walked up to me. And he said, "Wow, you look just like you did on TV, except you're a lot lighter than when you first got here." So that's where that came from. Regardless, I understand what I bring here. I understand that I'm an African American female in this role. I understand that's new, but the fact that I'm the police chief adds to that. And I would not have gotten to where I am today had I not had to carry myself in a certain way throughout my entire career. But what adds to that as a Black woman is that I have to take it a step higher. So what does that mean? That means everything has to be 200% better. Is it fair? No, but that's my reality. When I step out, as much as I would love to, just be in my sweats and my flip-flops and have a terrible day sometimes and not want to be, chatty and smile, I don't always get that opportunity to do that because I am that visible. I mean, that's not in my character anyway, but I know that I'm in a fishbowl everywhere that I go. But I also knew that when I took this job. So I'm not complaining about it, that's just my reality. It's even more so because here in the city, everybody is very relational. So I quickly learned that folks got a little offended if I didn't want to tell them where I lived right away. There's still only a handful of people who know that, but you know, no complaints. It's been good, but I do notice I stick out a little bit.
Thank you. While we were doing the search that resulted in your hiring, 21st century policing was very important to the mayor, having a chief that was versed in this. And if those of you that are not familiar, this was something that was developed during the Obama administration. Now we talk about it as community-focused policing. Can you tell the audience and the community a little bit about what's the difference and how will they see that difference in the behavior and the activities of your officers?
Sure, and you know, I just want to say something to that really quick too, because I've noticed, you know, I travel all over the country to discuss matters of policing, but most specifically as it relates to human and civil rights in policing. And I had a few people correct me over the last few months, because if you use the term 21st century policing, I'm told folks get offended because it's associated with the previous administration. And I said, what sense does that make? Because the tenets of 21st century policing are what they are. And if we're doing the right thing because it's the right thing, it shouldn't matter under which administration they came about. In fact, why are we even talking about 21st century policing? We should be planning for the next century. But anyway, modern day or community-focused policing or 21st century policing, it not only values community engagement, but it embraces technology, focuses on training, crime prevention, same thing, all these things that we talk about, and it also loops in officer safety and wellness. So the important thing, and again, when you talk about strategy or any type of philosophy, in our world, in the policing world, it's important not to just throw around buzzwords, because cops don't like buzzwords, because it sounds like it's just the latest and greatest thing, right? So I think it's important as a leader within any police bureau or agency is to infuse these philosophies into what we do to make sure that it's institutionalized. So same thing with the budget, right? How are our budget asks in alignment with the pillars or the principles of 21st century policing? How did we embrace technology? How did we embrace officer safety and wellness? What were our focuses and efforts towards community policing and engagement, right? All of these things. And when it becomes second nature, because it's intertwined in our policy and our accountability mechanisms in our systems, that's how it becomes implemented, and it lives beyond those of us who are sitting at the seats now today. Everything that I'm doing here today, I'm doing it with the intention and the purpose of making sure that it lives on for years and years to come. So when these young people are in the room, are our future leaders, they're just picking up the ball and picking up from where I left off.
Thank you. And again, for the benefit of our radio audience, this is the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Joe Wall, the principal of Wall & Associates, and I'm here today with Danielle Outlaw, the new chief of the Portland Police Bureau. Chief, I'd like to shift gears a lot. You've been speaking a lot later, and I really enjoyed your TED Talk recently that you gave. Through all of these presentations, is there a question that you would love to have been asked that you haven't been?
Actually, yes. I think I would have loved to have been asked about how I feel about Portland polite.
So how do you feel about Portland polite?
I'm learning. I'm navigating. No, in all seriousness too though, I picked up on it right away. And I said, oh, okay, it's different. But here's how it impacts what I do. For me, a lot of this is an uphill battle as it relates to, and I don't even want to use the word battle, but it's challenging because I'm trying to mend a lot of broken relationships between our community and the police bureau. And there are some facets out there that are willing to publicly just drag us, whether it's through social media, on the media, certain demonstrations, and everyone's well within their right to do so. Actually, I encourage that. We need to be checked from time to time. But when I ask you to sit down at the table with us so we can come to a resolution, so we can move forward and make sure that whatever we come up with to fix it has the best outcome for those who are complaining about it, there are still certain entities that refuse to sit down at the table with us. That I don't understand. So on the one hand, if we want to come together, right, we don't have to agree. We don't even have to like each other. But I don't quite understand it's like we're all for fill in the blank, whatever it is, unless it impacts me directly and has to change the way what I do. So I'm still kind of working my way around that, but it's a very small percentage of folks that I've met who are that way, but I'll get to them too.
Well, thank you. In our conversation with the students earlier, you mentioned a little bit about how you started in your career, and for the audience, could you share a little bit about how you ended up in law enforcement?
Sure. I have no problem with letting everybody know that as a young person, I did not have a favorable perception of the police at all. I didn't have positive interactions, and I even shared this in my TED Talk. We were conditioned as young kids in our neighborhood, when you see the police, you run. And we didn't even know why we were running. We just ran. It wasn't until high school that I had the opportunity to do a 2-week career exploration. And I rode with a particular police officer and had access to other officers in the Oakland Police Department, but I did a ride-along with one particular officer for 2 weeks. And we laughed, we went to the same restaurants around the city. He told me things about Oakland that I didn't even know about, and I'm from Oakland, I thought I knew everything. But he showed me the old home of Henry J. Kaiser, all these amazing things. And throughout that 2-week period, I saw him as a human being. I had never had the opportunity to interact with a cop like that before, ever. And as I interacted with officers throughout the building, I saw that, oh yeah, they would say, you go to school with my niece or my daughter, or such and such. And the more opportunities I had to interact, I said, oh, maybe they're not as bad as I thought. So from there, they kind of stuck their claws in me, and they asked me if I wanted to be a police explorer. And I said, why not? I'll try it. I get to wear a little uniform and go to the events during the summer, right? And that was really fun. So when it was time to go to college, I was no longer an explorer, but they said, we have a program that's similar to that. And you can be a police cadet, and we'll pay you $10 an hour. I thought I was going to be rich. $10 an hour. So I did that, and I was a police cadet throughout my whole time in undergrad. So because they had their claws in me for so long, I was able to, again, not only learn the inner workings. By the time I graduated from undergrad, the natural thing to do was go to the police academy. And I had been there ever since. And I honestly, if I didn't have that opportunity, it was those 2 weeks, I would not be sitting in this chair today, and I would not have had the perception change that I've had of the police that I did then.
And so for the benefit of our audience and those listening, what type of programs does Portland Police Bureau have for that type of involvement and exploration?
Thank you. You can go to our website, the Portland Police Bureau's website, and we do have a police cadet program as well. And I'm our age range is actually pretty wide. Our cadets compete nationally. They work throughout the Bureau. They are also very visible and seen in the community, and I would encourage anyone, especially our young people here, to apply to become a cadet. It's an amazing opportunity.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I got to ask you, as a mother of 2 teenagers, how are you spending Mother's Day?
That's actually a good question. And it's a real question. Here's why. I knew when I took this job that the first maybe 6 to 9 months, maybe a year, would be pretty demanding. And I've been working some very long hours. In fact, miraculously, I just got my voice back. I didn't have it as of this morning. But I have 2 events tonight, and then I have an event on Saturday. So I'm flying down to Oakland on Mother's Day in the morning, and then I come back late Sunday night. So that's what my family's been doing. They fly up here on the weekends, or I fly there. But it's just the way of the world, right? We talk about work-life balance, and I'm not the first mom to do it, but, you know, it's all part of it, and we make it happen.
So as the one that was probably the most responsible for getting you here, did I paint a realistic picture? She still returns my calls, by the way.
Actually, you did. And, you know, before anyone takes these sort of jobs, it would behoove them to do the research first, especially if you're going to up and leave one state and go to another. I had done a lot of research. Actually, you gave me a good picture. But in order for me to sacrifice and be willing to sacrifice, I had to make sure that I had as a complete picture as possible. So as things come my way, I'm not surprised. You know, again, there's been a lot of challenges, but I'm not surprised. And none of this that we're experiencing is insurmountable. We have some really talented people that work within the Bureau. They're very compassionate about what they do. They too love the community in the same way that I do. We just need to tweak a few things here and there, and that's what I'm here to do, provide some vision, raise the bar. I've also said internally that, you know, my role is not just to set the standard, but I want us above the national standard. And I want to make sure that we not only contribute at the national level, but that we're contributing internationally. What we do here in Portland will shape how we do business all over the world. So I say that because not only do we have the platform to do it, but there's the will not only in the community to do it, but there's the will internally to do it as well. So it's an exciting time. Everything isn't all, you know, I don't want to give the impression that I'm sitting up here like Eeyore or something, but, you know, these are some really, really exciting times. There will be some challenges, but we have the team together to work through that.
Police are, like teachers, are asked nowadays to be everything. And you're not only the first responders, but you're expected to provide all forms of public safety services. What can the community do for you and Portland Police Bureau?
That's a really good question. I appreciate that. You know, there's a couple things, and I'm going to put them out there. And this goes back to the Portland Polite thing that I mentioned. I didn't really give the example for that. I went this way. But I get asked a lot, you know, what can we do to support you? And I go, oh, I would love to. You know, when I first got here, I would throw out some things, and then we'd walk away, shake hands. That's great. And then I'd hear, you know, publicly, it would be a different story. You know, we'd get bashed one way or the other, or criticized, which is fine. Again, please criticize us. But then behind closed doors, it would be a different story. So now what I'm asking people to do when they say, what can I do to support you? Just the small task of, or the small thing of, you know, when they give us a compliment and they'll compliment the entire Bureau, and they say, what can I do to support you? I'll say, will you please say what you just told me publicly? Right. And that's important. That's important because my officers need to hear the support that they have, and they also need to know that the support isn't just for me, but it's for the Bureau as well. Now, with that said, the officers also need to hear the feedback that we get. And they also need to hear that although there's people in the community that will publicly blast us but won't sit with us at the table, 99.9% of the community will sit with us at the table. And so what the community can do is when we invite or when you have events, please invite us. And when we extend an invitation, please come to the table as well. We want to sit together in fellowship together to make investments now so that when there is another critical incident, because they will happen, unfortunately, we're already prepared to come together as a community to work through it. So that's what we need. We need people to come to the table. No, thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to now transition to your questions. So let's go to the audience for some questions, and we'll have folks that'll be coming around. In the meantime, I'd like to, again, for our radio audience, to remind everyone that this is the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Joe Wall with Wall & Associates, and I'm here today with Danielle Outlaw, our Portland Police Chief. So we've got a line going already, Danielle.
You see how big my eyes got? I said, ooh, that's a long line.
So when you come, please introduce yourself and speak very clearly.
Jim Zarin, City Club member. Welcome to this large crowd in a very small town. My question is based on 3 real quick incidents involving Portland police and homelessness. About a month ago, I saw a man in the middle of the transit mall, clearly out of his mind, stopping buses, and the Portland police came with their gloves on and tried to figure out what to do with them. Last week on the way to the City Club, by the Portland Art Museum, there was a Portland police officer talking to an obviously homeless man, and the guy said, I was okay till I broke my back and my wife died. And then this morning, I saw a woman behind umbrellas, and she said, the police hassle me, but they don't arrest me. So my question is, what's the role of the Portland Police Bureau in a town like this to deal with the homeless problem where you want these people off the street but have a good life?
Thank you. I was able to hear it. It's kind of muffled.
Okay.
I had a little bit of feedback. Could you put, just disclose the question once more?
It's not working at all. What's the role of the Portland Police Bureau in a city like Portland to address the homeless problem and keep these people off the streets and have a good life?
Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you. What's the role of the Portland Police Bureau in addressing the houseless issues or homeless issue? So I tell folks when I'm asked this question, and thank you, sir, for your question. I tell folks all the time when I'm asked this that ideally the Portland Police Bureau would have absolutely no role when dealing with those who are houseless, because we do not want to criminalize those who are without homes due to other non-criminal factors. With that said, we understand that there has to be balance. In the short term, we are doing everything that we can to be visible, to deter crime as it relates to those specific populations. But right now, and actually from day one, I've been sitting at the table with our county partners to identify as many solutions as possible outside of going to jail. Here's the issue, right? I can issue a citation to someone and they're still there. It doesn't abate the problem. I give this example all the time. I can arrest someone, take them to jail. There's no jail space. They're right back out. It doesn't abate the problem. I can arrest them, take them to jail. There is space. They're in jail for a little bit. They get some services, but then they're released. They're right back out. Doesn't abate the problem. We need to address the problem. And PPB, by me putting someone in the criminal justice system who doesn't necessarily need to be in the system but needs services, is not the solution. So I want to make sure that we're very strategic in working with our partners to be good partners, but to make sure that we're not unnecessarily introducing people into a system that don't need to be there.
Thank you. And again, just as a reminder, everyone watching or listening today is welcome to ask a question. And if you've written a question on an index card, hold it high for one of the City Club staff to collect. You can also submit questions via Twitter using the hashtag FridayForum. And to City Club members who would like to ask a question at the microphone, please identify yourself as a member and ask one question. And please, let's keep these to 30 seconds if possible. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kaden. I would like to ask, how are the police preventing the presence of prejudice within the force commonly shown by social media?
I'm sorry, it's hard to...
That's okay.
How are the police preventing the presence of prejudice within the force commonly shown by social media?
How does the... Yeah, come on up here.
Oh, thank you. How are the police preventing the presence of prejudice within the force commonly shown by social media?
I'm going to read that again. How are the police preventing the presence of prejudice within the force commonly shown by social media? Thank you. That's a good question. Bias training is important. I mentioned that earlier. We'll be rolling it out this week. We all have biases. And the unfortunate part of that is that when we have biases in this profession, that can impact, again, who ends up in our criminal justice system. It doesn't mean that our officers are racist. It just means that, one, we as human beings need to identify that we have them, be aware when our biases kick in, and know how to counter when we identify that. Training is huge. Huge, huge, huge when it comes to that, because it's not only manifests when we interact, but it manifests when we do traffic stops, when we choose to proactively enforce, when we implement any crime-fighting strategy. If we don't have our biases checked and in place, the impacts to our communities can be extremely harmful and disparate. I wanted to say something really quick. I know we got a huge line of that. Well, you know, I'll wait as it relates to bias, but I'd like to hear this young man's comment.
Hi, I'm Noah, and I got a question. What kind of problems have you faced as a police officer, as an African-American police officer, going through the ranks?
Can we figure out another way to get the question? It's really muffled. I'm sorry. I can't hear up here.
We're not able to hear very well the question, so...
He's 17 years old. That's a big 17, huh?
18.
18.
So what kind of problems have you faced as an African-American police officer going through the ranks?
Ooh, what kind of problems have I faced as an African-American police officer going through the ranks? Good question. I would say as an African-American, I'll add female to that, in a male-dominated profession. And then being younger than a lot of my counterparts. So it's a triple threat. And I say that because there's biases that come along with not only being African American, but then also with being a female. And because we bring a different skill set as women to this profession, you know, many years ago, you would see recruiting advertisements of people jumping out of helicopters and rappelling from buildings and big machine guns and everything else. And those were the sort of people that you attracted. What we're looking for today are those with interpersonal skills and the soft skills. We're focusing on emotional intelligence because we want people that can get out and talk and interact and engage with the community. And as women, we have those soft skills. Traditionally, and again, when we used to hire, that wasn't looked as something as favorable. It was seen as weak. And you were deemed not to be one of the stronger officers. So I will say you have to have a thick skin, and I just continue to utilize my strengths wall all of that out and continue to climb through. You can't get to this position with having a thin skin and not being willing to navigate through adversity.
Thank you. One of the questions I know that the students are leading nationally has to do with gun violence, and this question comes in from one of our listeners here. Does the proliferation of gun ownership concern the police in the Bureau as much as it does many citizens? If yes, what can we do about it?
Wow, yes. Yes and yes. So I will say, you know, the gun laws are a little bit different here in this state than where I'm from, so I had to get used to that. You know, my first demonstration, seeing people with guns just out, and nobody really seemed like, you know, it was a big deal here. Guns are an issue. Guns in the wrong hands of people are an even larger issue. We train to use guns in our profession, but those who have them out there on the streets unlawfully, they don't. They don't go to target practice and everything else. And I would encourage not only our community members, but our young people who are asking these questions to be vocal, to continue to be vocal. We loved how you demonstrated in your honor to speak up for yourselves, using your voice against gun violence, to push you know, for your protections. Continue to do more of that. Continue to support, stand up and support what you value and what you believe in, because when it's heard from the young people and from the community as opposed to just us, I think it gains more traction.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, they can hear. It's just a little muffled.
So coming from a known background, like from Oakland, why would you leave everything behind to come here? And what challenges have you faced? Have you ever rethought this isn't the job for you?
What was the second part?
What was the second part?
It was has she ever rethought about her decisions?
Did you hear what she said?
Regret the decision.
Do I regret the decision? Oh, no, absolutely no regret. So that's a fair question. I didn't take this job for the title. I didn't take the job for the pay cut. You know I love you, boss. I came here, no, seriously, I came here because when I heard the mayor say what he needed in a police chief, what the community said they wanted in a police chief, the issues that I knew the city was facing, all of this were things that I had firsthand experience in. And it wasn't just experiencing them as it occurred, but I had firsthand experience in moving things forward. I knew that I could add value. I knew that I have a very strong passion for this work, and I knew that I could really contribute and be a part of something amazing here, and I knew what the mayor's vision was. So I was absolutely excited to be a part of it, so much so that I was willing to make the sacrifice to come. My family is still in Oakland, so we go back and forth. I live in two places, you know. That's a huge sacrifice, but I did it because I love what I do. I love people. I love the people of this city, and I know that I can be a part of something amazing. So no regrets.
I'm afraid this is our last question, so promise.
Promise King, member of the Portland League of Minority Voters. Well, by your training and experience, you're the best chief of police we've had in a long time.
Thank you.
I want to ask some questions of whether you have what you need to do your job you've encapsulated, and also to ask about your relationship with the unions, because some of us who've been in this business for a long time understand the challenge is always with the union. Beam me up.
relationship with the union and...
What's your relationship with the union? How can we support you to fix that?
So I'll say off the bat, thus far my relationship with the union has been a good relationship. They too, I meet with the president of the PPA regularly. They recognize the fact that we need to succeed and be successful. Now, I will say, you know, we all represent different interests. Their role is to represent what they believe are the interests of their membership. But with that said, communication has been very strong, and if there has been any changes or anticipated changes that we need, we sit at the table and we hash them out. So I come from a place with a very strong union there, and you know, like I said, it's all about sitting at the table. We can agree to disagree, but we are going to move forward. Thank you.
And I'll turn it back to Lisa.
Our time is unfortunately up, and we need to pause the discussion for now, but we hope that this is the beginning of even more in-depth conversations for each of you. Please join me in thanking our panel for being here today, and I'd also like to say a special thank you to Lisa Collins and David Martinez, who produced today's program. We appreciate all of your hard work. Thank you all.